On this episode of The Badge and Beyond, we may be discussing domestic violence, mental health issues, suicide, and self-harm.
If you would like support and someone to talk to, the right avenues in your local area would be appreciated for you to have a look at those options. Please make use of avenues such as Lifeline on 13 11 14 and also for domestic violence hotline 1-800 RESPECT. So viewer and listening discretion is advised. Welcome everybody to The Badge and Beyond. Anthony Macklin and Danny Mikati with you. We would like to dedicate this episode to a very topical kind of theme at the moment, which is the mass exodus from the New South Wales Police Force. Not just New South Wales, I think police force across...
Nationally,
yeah. So I thought, Anthony, what are your thoughts on why all of a sudden, this seems to be, particularly in New South Wales, all these police officers just leaving the force?
Well, I think there's a plethora of reasons. But I've been talking to a lot of my colleagues, same as you, and former colleagues, and people who are still currently in the police force, and honestly, running Precision Integrity as a private investigation service that only really works with detectives. We are getting hit up more and more often for jobs from good cops. And it does beg the question. I know it's been in the papers and it's been fairly topical, but I don't think there's just one reason. But look, I think a lot of it's got to do with public perception. I think a lot of it's got to do with the fact that particularly New South Wales police are paying police officers to leave. And I think it's got a lot to do with management and culture. For example, someone I was talking to the other day said the current New South Wales Police Commissioner sent out an email saying, you're all very well paid, so the reason why people are leaving, and mind you, at least 50 police officers a week are leaving New South Wales Police Force, and recruitment currently stands at about, I think last two classes were about 90 and 150.
Wow.
That's across sort of, I think, 6 or 8 months, so they're not keeping up the retention levels. But I think it's one of those things that here you've got a senior, the leader of the force saying, you're paid well, that's not the problem. Rather than asking people, rather than getting out there and saying, what is the issue? She's sent out this email, you're paid well, there's no other issues that we can establish, so clearly you just need guidance in where to take your career. So we're going to set up a career advisory board. And anybody that's set foot in a police station for more than 5 minutes will tell you it's a lot different to that.
You bring up a good point about the academy classes, but like notwithstanding, back in our day, because mine was pre-Olympics, we had huge classes, right? 500, 700, 800, whatever. But notwithstanding, how long is it going to take for those new recruits to, first of all, finish the training, be able to actually work by themselves and stop being a liability, because in the beginning you're a liability, and then we're going to wait a couple of
No disrespect to the new recruits out there.
Yeah, but you are, right? You're going to wait until, 10 years until they're losing the most experienced cops out there.
Yeah.
And I think the initial, I'm assuming the initial idea behind this ODS scheme was, or the optional disengagement, and where they're actually paying you to leave, was maybe they'll get rid of people that it's time for them to go, or, you're getting rid of some of your best, if not the best, because there's opportunities out there.
That's right.
Look, it's good for us as people that employ former detectives. I mean, I'm not upset. I'll pick 2 of your best. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much they start recruiting, because we're not going to see the fruit for many years. No. So it baffles me, this concept of let's keep going and pay great cops to leave.
And look, I think you're exactly right. I think they've tried to put this as an incentivise leaving for the people. And look, we know there's an element in the police force, as there probably is in many government jobs, in many private sector jobs as well, where people just turn up to be paid. They put in very little effort. They don't care. They really just don't want to leave. They don't know where to go next. So I feel like that was their idea. They were trying to incentivise leaving for those people, but also probably looking for a way, as people were getting older in their career, minimise the costs of the long service leave and how that impacts the workforce and the insurance claims and post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that affects a lot of police officers.
Yep.
So I think they were trying to minimise that a little bit, but what they've actually done is give people the opportunity. Good cops who were very keen to work started looking around going, you know what, I can get paid out. I've got effectively a year's salary to leave, and in that time I can move to a corporate world where I don't have to work weekends, I don't have to work night shifts, I don't have to work Christmas Day, New Year's Day, lose time with my family, I can work from home.
Yep.
I mean, there is inside factors that we just don't even, the public don't see. For example, in the police force, if you want to take annual leave, you don't get annual leave when you want it. You need to apply for it usually about 12 to 18 months before, and it's got to be approved, but you all work in teams or sections, so only so many people can be off at a certain time. So, and then they have the right to change that on you if they want to. So we've had people, and personally you would have seen as I have, they've booked overseas holidays and their leave just gets cancelled. And they're told, well, too bad. And I think for too long, the organisation has had plenty of recruits coming in. So they treat their people with a little bit less decent, shall we say, a little bit of a laissez-faire concept. Yeah. So you can bring anybody in. There's always someone, you're just a number, anybody can fill your job because they had multiple people applying. Now
but this isn't new, Anthony, right? This isn't new, right? Like, go back, even during our time, I even still remember on the sergeant's eligibility course exam, for me, it was do a report about police retention. Right?
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's still part of the exam because it's been a problem for God knows how long. And if we go back to let's have a look at key decisions that have been made, even over the past couple of decades. They've changed the promotion system, I don't know how many times.
Yes.
Even just during our time, right? And it seems like it's a cycle. We change what a patrol is called, then a command, and this, and all this other stuff. We do whatever we can to try to move. We go from the 12-hour shift back to the 8-hour, different rosters. There's been a lot of mucking around with how we do things. And in all these years, you'd think the formula by now, someone should get it right.
Yes.
But in that process, you're also, the leadership keeps changing and changing and changing and changing.
Yes.
And as you and I both know, even at the patrol level or command level, the person that steers the ship, say the captain at the time, all those around him then become him, right? So they kind of have to acclimatise to that kind of leadership, and so they know if they want to move on, they've got to be in his or her good graces. They adopt the same kind of attitude. So if you've got a leader that's really about his troops, the culture at the workplace is fantastic. If you've got a leader that's self-interested and it's all about their own promotion and throwing everyone under the bus, which happens a hell of a lot.
Too often.
Yep. Then those, let's say the inspectors around them will be the same, right? If they want to get ahead, they're going to have to try to impress that person. The reason I'm saying this is, if you look at the introduction of the leading senior constable rank, right? So that was brought in with the philosophy of keeping trained operators and seasoned and experienced people on the road.
Yes.
Right? So in your frontline policing, your general duties, if you had 7 years service or above, you get this nice little promotion with an extra rank, a special rank in between senior constable and sergeant. So what do they do to the sergeant rank? Nothing. So they thought, okay, let's have someone who's under the sergeant make more money with less responsibility. And wonder why nobody wants to be a sergeant after that. And so then what happens if you do want to further your career, you won't, as soon as you hit your 7 years, you're thinking, I can max out this level when I've got 9 years service. I think it takes you 2 years or so to max out the rank in terms of pay and stuff. And then if you're willing to go back 3 years and pay, you become a sergeant. I don't understand that methodology at all. It then caused its own issues, right? And so I feel like the strategic thinking from the leadership at the police force, or whether that's government as well, is significantly amiss. And it's been that way for a long time. This latest decision to me it doesn't surprise me in terms of the scheme, but let's see what we're doing. We've got the biggest shortage we've had probably in a very long time. We were on skeleton crews during the Olympics, and we managed.
Yeah.
Right? But the Olympics last for a number of weeks, and then it goes back to normal.
That's right.
Now things are just getting worse. They're pulling detectives out, putting them on the street, and you know what's going to happen. They're not going to. People that aren't interested in doing general duties work, no matter what squad you pull them out from, you're not going to get a great response.
No. But look, the thing about it is the police force is working anywhere between popular commands, places people want to be at. They're about 80% staffing. Some are down to 60%. And what happens is all those guys that are left are now being pumped, and they're working harder and harder, and they're getting more and more jack. They're sick of being treated like they're just someone's tissue or Kleenex, never getting time to do the job properly, and they're looking at all their mates that are left going, why am I here?
Yeah.
So it becomes a very cyclical kind of thing where people leave, the job gets harder, they're left with less good people to support them, so they're working harder, they watch the people around them that aren't doing anything going, well, why should I work hard, or why should I stay? Then they leave, and it's like a ratcheting effect.
Yeah.
But I think one of the important points you bring up is that the politics. Internal politics in the police force is huge, and you have to work with your commander, and it's a rank organisation, a rank-based organisation. So whatever comes down from the top flows down, and I think they've promoted a lot of people into management positions that don't look after the team, or when they talk about looking after the police and the community, but really they're just looking after themselves.
Yeah, and here's your secondary employment policy.
Oh.
So basically, let's say you're a shift worker. Okay, you're on general duties. The majority of police are, right? You're a shift worker. You're working on the road. You work your 4 days, 5 days, whatever, and you get a couple of days off. To make ends meet, considering, especially if you're living in Sydney, right? To make ends meet, you're doing, say, you're a tradie. You're doing maybe some plumbing jobs on the side, or whatever skill set you've got, and then that's the only way it's working for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Then what happens? They're like, because of staffing, we're going to put a hold on secondary employment application. Well, what do you want? You're prepared to pay everyone to leave completely.
Yes.
Right? But you're not prepared to let them have the ability, which doesn't cost you money, to make their own money, because it makes better money than what you pay them. You're not prepared to let them do that. And then mental health is a massive issue. Till now, we're still losing, police by suicide and other scary things, right?
I think that just on that, there's been a couple of suicides this week in the nation from police officers.
Yeah. And then we're not going to invest in that.
No.
But we'll invest in career advice.
Yeah.
The career advice you're telling me is get the hell out.
Yes.
Because the grass is so much greener, no matter how much they tell you it's not.
And look, again, on the cycle, how many times did you hear about, there's employee assistance branch, and you can get counselling and whatnot. I was listening to someone else's experience, and I think they went for 3 or 4 different sessions, and they got told, that's it. No more. You're worried if you ring them up and say, look, I've just been with this incident, or something's troubling me, that you're going to get removed and, have your firearm taken off you. And the problem is there's still a bit of a stigma in the cops, I think, around mental health. So if you don't want to work in the station as a uniform constable, you hate working the station because it's all paperwork, it's answering phone calls and doing the rest. That's not the type of people they are. They like to be out doing things. They don't want to be seen, taken off the road. They don't want to be stuck in the station, but also they don't want to be leaving their peers short, and that's what they feel like they're doing. And rather than investing in saying, look, these are the companies you can go to, you can have private sessions, and we encourage it, and you can discuss and understand ways to work and reduce PTSD and talk about the incidents you're seeing and do some self-assessment. No, you get to pick up the phone and talk to someone random. You never get to talk to the same person, and know that if you say the wrong thing in those meetings or sessions, potentially your career's over. This episode of the Badge and Beyond podcast is brought to you through the sponsorship of
IC Technology. You can find them on ictechnology.com.au for all things IT and cyber.
And Precision Integrity Services, who you can find at privateinvestigatorsydney.com.au. They're just not doing enough to look after those officers. And look, I think it's pretty hard to manage 3 years in the police force without having some form of PTSD.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the problem then becomes in terms of the cops that are day to day doing their thing, and then there's that guilt sort of if you call in sick, like you're letting the team down. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And then, well, you're also conditioning yourself for burnout. It's just constant, and because of the lack of staff that are available, and you're pulling people in from other departments, it just doesn't work. It's like a self-decaying model. And I think from now, like I can, unless something is done like revolutionary really soon, it's going to be critical.
Yeah. Oh, look, I agree 100%. Now, if you think one of the big changes I think that has occurred across probably the last 5 to 10 years has been public opinion of the police.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes the police have been their own worst enemy there. We've allowed oftentimes a vocal minority to throw up a narrative about what police do in the street and suggest, there's this overwhelming feeling that amongst the police force that the public perceive them as being corrupt, as being heavy-handed. They feel like they're over-scrutinised, under-resourced, overworked. The problem is, as a corporation, as an organisation, in my opinion, New South Wales Police haven't gotten on the front foot outside of their dancing cop and this and that, and what's the penguin's name? I can't remember. There's a Charlie, the police penguin, sending that out to the occasional school fete. I really don't think they've got on the front foot to explain day-to-day policing with the grit and dirt that it comes with, and helping people understand the decisions that are made behind the scenes, because they're too worried about a little bit of backlash or explaining to the community that crime exists, bad stuff happens, and the force is not perfect. And ultimately, maybe if they did that, there might be some questions raised about training, about health services for the officers, about the number of police that are able to respond at any one time.
Yeah.
So they would prefer to keep the community in the dark. They'd prefer to keep an image of, look at us, we're corporate and professional, because remembering too, superintendents and above, one of their KPIs is perception of crime. So they need to keep it looking like, hey, there's no crime and everything's happening and we're doing a great job, because they're measured against that. Yeah,
yeah. And that's a very good point. It's the conflict of what the internal KPIs are and then what's happening out there on the street. And what I remember, I said it during COVID, I believe the community policing was set back like 20 years.
Yes.
Right? Amazing community engagement work had been done. Big bridges built, especially post-Cronulla riots, and then bang, just shattered it by becoming the COVID Gestapo.
Yep.
Right. And again, nothing to do with the police that are, again, rank and file. What can they do? Those things come from the top, right? They get given those things. And if you're going to show disparities between areas of where you work, and certain communities get, better treatment than others, you're just going to cause absolute mayhem. And that leaves a very bad taste in your mouth. And there are people that lost many, like family members, whether it was parents, children, siblings, they're not going to forget that.
No.
So there's already the cops' backs against the wall in terms of community perception. And if you're going to lose your best and bravest, who's left?
Yep.
And what kind of representation is that then going to be? Right, so I really feel sorry for the ones entering now, because now they have to not only deal with what normally is very confronting, because exactly what you said, because you never really see what's behind the scenes. You never actually see what policing is like until you join. You don't even see it at the academy. Right? So you're at the academy, you do simulations, you do whatever, right?
Yeah.
The academy gives you the groundings that you're supposed to have, and I'll use that term loosely. And then you do your first shift, or you spend a little bit of time, on the ride along in your placement. And then, hey, this is a different world. And then it really depends where you're placed, because some commands will show you things you've never dreamed of will be happening.
Yes.
And then it's also, hope to God I'm not in a toxic workplace.
That's right.
So there's all these different things that come into play, and now we have to worry about a community who's probably got more resentment now than it had a decade ago or 2 decades
Absolutely.
ago. So it's a significant problem. So you're faced with a dilemma of, I'm trying to attract new recruits to come in, but the right recruits. But if I'm not going to get them, well, are they going to decrease the standards and keep going down so you get whatever you get, which is what I'm hearing?
Yes, I'm hearing the same thing. And I'm hearing they're contacting people that they previously forced a resignation from or sacked.
Yeah.
Saying, oh, maybe you didn't do that.
You're not that bad.
You might be able to come back. That's the wrong way to go.
On that, would you?
No.
Oh, good, because you're my partner. But the business would suffer. But why wouldn't you?
Look, on the outside world, I've got too many things going on. Don't get me wrong, I love the cops. I love some of the people I worked with, but it's all the things we couldn't change. You know, the good people that were there are leaving. Those people that are either started out keen and then become jaded, or were just looking for that element of go to work, get paid, don't care. I think that's still there. The number of stories we get of people coming to us where police have failed to do the right thing, and look, there's a litany of those stories. I could give you a new one every week. Where people are reporting matters and they're just not being taken seriously, or they're not being taken on board at all and getting any investigation whatsoever. But I think management for me is the key thing. You have to be focused on what the community needs. You have to be focused on your troops. It's not about, if you're focused on where your next career move is and which, and it does get to this, which political party is in office and who you're aligned with and which team member you're going to take with you, then you're not focused on doing the job that the community needs. You're not, and ultimately you're not focusing on achieving the goals of the organisation. You're looking inwards rather than outwards. And the people I saw being promoted were not the guys that were super keen and were out there, good leaders, helping the community and trying to have that understanding of how to educate the guys, lead from the front and sort out the crime problems. They were the people that were really good at admin, really good at talking themselves up, never went out and ticked all the boxes but didn't actually achieve a lot. And look, one of my bosses hated me for the fact that I was always out. As an inspector, every shift I got out on the road and I'd try to back up the team and I'd try to talk to the guys, and I think I'd been to more deceased than anybody else before I left in that year from the station, because I felt it was important to attend and support the crews that were there. But I also had a feeling of, if there's something big going on, I want to be first through the door. That's how you lead. Sitting behind a desk and talking about when your best story is about some new policy you put in place in the cops, you're not a cop. I'm sorry, you're an administrator. And that's one of those things. I don't know how you get rid of that, because that is the higher echelons of the organisation.
Agreed. And I think from my perspective, I had dreams that I was getting a phone call that, hey, you come back as a superintendent. You come back as a commander, right? Like, give me a double promotion.
You're a little too real to be a superintendent.
Yeah, just a smidge. And I was like, no. So I know I'd say no, right? And the thing is, like you, I regret nothing. I am who I am today because of what I experienced, how I was trained, and who I was around. And I loved and hated the experience every day, right? It's just part of life. But it's given us the unique skill set and sort of capabilities that we have today. But this new model that's being run right now, I would very much clash with it, even if I was still in middle management. At that point, because a good leader also has to represent their troops. A good leader should be the mouthpiece, should be the advocate for their team. That's why they call you a team leader. And it can't just be about towing the company line of above. It needs to be about what's right. And if you are a police officer on the front lines, you're still representing your community. At the end of the day, you're they call it community policing. When you're policing your community. And so the officers should be representative of that community, so they should come from those diverse backgrounds from the communities that they police. They should definitely have an understanding of the population that they're looking after. It can't just be a one-off induction when you first start into the area. You need to live and breathe the streets. You need to understand what's happening there. And you need to connect, you need to cultivate relationships. There's so much to it. But I feel like it's become this cookie cutter approach of, it's just flowcharts, right? This is what you do when you come to this is what you do when you come to this, this is what you do when you come to this. Bullcrap your way through an online learning thing and just keep clicking next, and off you go.
You didn't find online learning was effective?
Funnily enough, I could get through some courses on a night shift, let me tell you. And as much as yourself, as you know, because a lot of the times I was working, when you were leading the shift, I didn't want a bar of sitting in custody watching Netflix. Like, that was ridiculous. And I hated that position. And the only part of being a sergeant that I hated was that I would have to every now and then take on looking after custody, where others in my cohort absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Right?
I love those guys for the fact that I didn't have
100%. So I'd look at the roster and go, oh, okay, he'll take it. Or she'll take it. Fantastic. Because with me, it was a flick of the coin whether I'm happy to manage the station and still look after and give mentoring to the troops, but put me on the road any day of the week for the same reason. Otherwise, like, then the blood isn't blue in your veins for me. Like, it doesn't still go that hard. But I think there are questions there that Anthony and I are happy to answer. You know, if you've got, especially on the topic of the retention rates, and even mental health has been coming up a lot of late in terms of the policing. One of the articles I read yesterday was, which is something that's been mentioned so many times throughout the years. You know, why don't we have mental health workers, attending certain jobs to assist with mental health patients, but also with the mental health of the police. Now, if you go back and look into certain policing shows where they've got the criminal profiler, they've got the psychologist, they've got the blah, blah, blah. But really, and I think in terms of domestic violence, the social worker aspect should have been put in 20 years ago, where police aren't trained to be social workers. No. That's the issue. Okay, they're dealing with domestic violence on the ground in a very raw situation, and they're not only dealing with the offenders, and it's the most dangerous jobs you'll ever go to with domestic violence. Yep. You're dealing with the victims, and a social worker, how they speak with a victim, is very different to a police officer who's there to look for enforcing the law on domestic violence offences, but also keeping themselves and the community safe. And people find that hard. But there's a real juxtaposition in your mind when you're attending these kind of jobs on how I have to have empathy and support for my victim, but also try not to get stabbed to death, and also keep my partner alive, and then also am I making sure I'm not ruining the evidence in terms of my questioning.
Am I attending to the policy? Am I ticking all the boxes I need to tick?
Yep.
What questions do I need to answer? What's that job being broadcast on my shoulder with through the radio? All those other things. And the thing about what you're saying is 100% correct, and I couldn't agree more. We've multifaceted agencies is really what we need, because what we're asking from police is, and think about this, whenever you see police being criticised for in complex situations, you're asking, like you say, you're asking for a police officer to be a social worker. You're asking for them to be a trained negotiator. You're asking for them to be able to understand all the different mental health illnesses and differentiate the approach that's required for them. You're asking them to be part lawyer. They've got to understand all those different things. You're also asking them to be hard ass. Someone that knows how to kick a door in and talk to someone and stand there and cop abuse. But then whenever there's a police shooting, there's always why aren't you a martial arts expert? Why can't you shoot them in the knee? Because obviously we're all sniper trained, like, SAS and all the rest of this kind of stuff.
Why didn't you talk him down? What happened? And then you got people tasering old ladies.
Yeah, exactly. And the commissioner saying, I didn't know we were going to nursing homes and doing these things, whereas it's become fairly commonplace. And look, I remember even mental health institutions. How many times do you get a call to a mental health institution where they're in a secure facility and you're being asked to come in and help control someone? Like, that's really not a policing matter. That is your organisation's point to deal with, but as a police officer, you're the last point of call. And I think that's something people don't understand, is that there's no one else to call. In everybody else's day-to-day job, when something goes bad, you call the supervisor, they call their upper management, something else happens, you call a consultant, you call this, you do whatever else. And you get to jobs and you have to point out to people we are it.
Yep.
There is no one else coming.
Yep.
We can't pick up the phone to the army and say, hey, we've got a problem, what do you think? You're the guy that has to make a situation resolve itself. And how many times does it happen at like 3 a.m. in the morning when you're on your bare skeleton crew, no one's answering the phone, even your other resources you can't get out from the cops. And there's really probably like 5 of you standing around going, all right, well, how are we going to manage this? That's it. So I think there's an expectation, and Hollywood has created that expectation in people as well.
Yeah.
And that's not helping us.
So we're keen to hear questions and comments. So please make comments on a different social media platforms, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Instagram. We're happy to field those questions. Where do we live at the moment outside the police force?
We are at privateinvestigatorsydney.com.au. You can find us there. Give us a call, email us any questions you've got. If you need some assistance, we're available. An email is available any time of the day and we'll get to you the very next day. But look, whilst we are, one of the things we do a lot of is helping people understand policing responses, and when they don't get a response from the police, sometimes that's legitimate, sometimes that's not legitimate. We tell them where they can go and what they can do and help them resolve their issues. So one of the things, just off the top of my head, for example, is stalkers. The police force is not well resourced to manage stalkers until they've committed an offence.
Yep.
Danny and I kind of specialise in doing that work. It's one of the things I love about our work. So if you're struggling with some of those issues, feel free to get in touch with us.
Thanks for listening.
You have that thing, you're like, I don't know if they're my socks.
Yeah.
I put them on. I don't think they are my socks.
Take off.
Keep it real.
Our rust layers will be ready.